There is lots still up in the air with North Carolina's roster for the 25-26 season. Who are the right fits in a critical year for Coach Hubert Davis?
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Thursday, March 27th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making us your first listener watch to get your Thursday going the right way. Special shout out to all you everydayers, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, and our great insiders as well. Joining me today is our good buddy, Coach Pac Kilby, rocking that Dale Pirate shirt, still glowing from that state championship they had just a couple short weeks ago. Congrats, Pac. We're so proud of you. Here's where we're going today, y'all. As is often the case during transfer portal season, we want to get you to know a couple of the guys that are in the portal, some guys that Carolina either has gone after, is planning to go after, or that we think they should go after, right? So we're going to have two of those that we'll talk about later on, both of whom would be some nice Elliot Cadeau replacements. But where we want to start today's conversation is I've been able to talk about the roster some, but this is our first opportunity to talk about it with Coach Pac to get his insights, what he thinks are good things to happen. And again, as I said in the cold open, this is a critical year for Hubert Davis, right? Like Jim Tanner comes in as the GM, and if things don't go well, I don't know where we're headed. So, Pac, let me just set up where the roster is at right now, and then just want to get your takes on where things stand. Obviously, RJ Davis, Jalen Withers, Tyson Claude out. They're out of eligibility, and they are gone. As of right now, as of this recording, and I have to time stamp it because things are always changing, but we know that Elliot Cadeau and Jalen Washington are already in the portal. As Pac starts to answer, I will pull up the scholarship chart so everyone can see where it's at. But Pac, I guess the first place I want to start is asking you if you think it was the right decision by both Elliot and Jalen to enter the transfer portal.
I do. I think, here's the thing about it. Both young men are great kids. And in their own right, they're good players. Certainly respect their games. They both bring great things to the table. But I think for them and for North Carolina basketball, it was the right move. For them, they can go get a fresh start somewhere else. And Carolina gets to begin, like you said, this is a major offseason. So we get to kind of revamp what it is exactly that we're looking for, and hopefully change the product that we're putting on the floor by doing that. And so I think it was a necessary move for North Carolina. But in the end, I think it's still a win-win for the players and the university.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, Pac. I was watching some Elliot Cadeau high school highlights just a little bit ago before we were recording. I was like, where was that guy? Like, he was so athletic. He was so confident. He was pulling shots without hesitation. Just like, I don't know that we ever saw that, like in its fullness as the way it was. So, Pac, you mentioned that what Carolina does need to bring in and who that is. I think a big part of that is going to be this combination of Jim Tanner and Hubert Davis and the rest of the staff and what they're looking for. So, Pac, I want you to share what you think Coach Davis would be looking for, and then I want to get your take on it after that. So just go ahead and answer now first what you think Hubert Davis will be looking for.
Well, on his Hubert Davis live radio show, there's actually a quote out there where Hubert says, we need to get bigger. I would like to look at the analytics and figure out what getting bigger would do for us on both ends of the court. And so I think that's exactly what he's going to be looking to do. I think if you look at the scheme that we've put on the floor the last few years under the Hubert Davis era, there's been a lot of switching defensively. It's been more of a pro scheme, I guess, than college. And so if we're going to do that, we do need to get bigger. We need to get longer. We need to get meatier. We need to get stronger. We need all those things in order to do that effectively. So I definitely think the goal with this team is going to be to get bigger. And I think it's going to be to find more consistent shooting and a roster that's deeper in the ability to shoot. It doesn't need to be one or two guys that we depend on to hit our shots. We need to be able to put 3 or 4 guys on the floor that can shoot it. Yeah. And so I think that will also be a goal of Hubert Davis's.
I love all of that, Pac. I mean, you don't have to look any further down the road than Durham, North Carolina to see how important that size is with the tallest team in the nation, looking like a national championship favorite. Also, did you say that they need to get meatier?
Yeah, I've got some pretty strong thoughts on that too. I don't want to just come on here with hot take after hot take, but I've kind of thrown some thoughts around in my own brain. Is Jonas Saracen doing a good job, or has he gotten comfortable? Yeah, he's been the strength and conditioning coach at North Carolina for years, but we just don't look like. Go watch SEC teams. Look at Tennessee. I mean, they look like they're about to film the movie 300. They look like they're just soldiers. And our guys, we just kind of roll out there and we look real skinny, and we look like what old school basketball players used to look like. You know, you would see the tall, long, and lanky. Tennessee looks jacked, you know, or any of the SEC teams. We've got to get stronger, bigger, and put some weight on. And so
I just like that you used the word meteor. That made me very happy. I want to see some meteor heels. That's the goal. So, Pac, that's what you think Hubert Davis will be doing. I want to know what Pac Kilby would be doing. What are your thoughts? And you could go general, or if you want to dive in specific on any players, just talk to us about your thoughts.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and deep dive it. You know, I think Carolina made the right move to move on at point guard. But with that, we've got to make the right pickup. And for me, you know, I've been saying this on the Discord or on social media when I talk to different Carolina fans. Is Elliot Cadeau good? He absolutely is. And he's going to serve somebody really well as a point.
I hope so.
But, you know, what he brings to the table, his ability to pass. But for every head turning pass, there's a head scratching turnover. And there's the inability to shoot consistently. You know, people are basically playing the drive, daring him to shoot. And then there's the size issue, which I know he can't control that, but we can control what we bring in. We've got to get better defensively at that position. And so for us, I think, you know, a lot of people look at it like, man, I don't know if we're going to get anybody as good as Elliot Cadeau. And if you look at it like they're about to play a one-on-one match, maybe not. But we can get somebody better for Carolina and what we need. And I think that's going to be really crucial in that regard. So, and I know we'll talk more about some potential fill-ins for that spot. But I think we've got to get more size, more consistent shooting, and more level-headedness, and maybe a little bit more sure with the basketball at the point guard position. At the 2, you know, guys, I love Seth Trimble, but I think there's a world where we have to separate emotion from reality. And I, as much as I love Seth Trimble, he may be my favorite Tar Heel on the team aside from RJ Davis. And I just can't bring myself to think he should be playing a starting role. And the reason I say that is because I do believe that Drake Powell should. And if you have Seth and Drake in the starting lineup, there's 2 guys that aren't great three-point shooters. You know, the defense isn't going to respect that as well. So I would love to see us go get somebody like McNeely from Virginia and plug him in at the 2. He's got some size, like we talked about. He's got consistent stroke from deep. He's got some strength to him. Really good, really solid player defensively. I don't think you get recruited to Virginia if you don't play defense. So, you know, I think he brings that to the table. And that also brings up Ian Jackson. And I know it's kind of been said, it's really kind of like come back to Carolina or go to the pros from what I've heard and what I've read. And I think for me, y'all don't slay me in the comments, okay? I kind of just almost would rather move on from that. If he comes back, great. I got nothing against him. I love him. I think he's a great kid, and he's a fantastic player. But like if it comes to McNeely or Ian Jackson, I think I take McNeely. I think McNeely's the better college basketball player. And Ian may project better in the pros for sure, but McNeely helps us win more in college, I think. So I'd rather go that route with the experience and the size and the defensive growth that we would get from McNeely. I think that would be better. And then just to kind of move through this, I think Drake would be great at the 3. We all know that Caleb Wilson's coming in. He's going to start at the 4 most likely. And then at the 5, we've got to go get a strong, like old school, prototypical big back to the basket, can bury you, can post up, can dominate physically, defensively, and on the glass. At least in my mind, I know there's a world where some people would say we'd rather have 7-foot lob rim protector. I kind of disagree with that. I'd rather have a back to the basket, somebody that can really command a presence inside. Not to say that they couldn't block shots and do those things, but I think most importantly, I would like for them to command attention when they have the ball inside. And so I think we need those things. And if we do that and we can get some other guys that can, have length and shoot the basketball to play roles off the bench, then I really like where our team would be sitting. But we all know that's a lot easier said than done.
Pac, if I can summarize it, it sounds like you're saying, and this is if Drake Powell comes back, that Carolina, in your opinion, has their starting 3 and 4 on the roster, but still needs a 1, 2, and 5.
Yes.
I would tend to agree. What I had talked about earlier in the week, you can't have a starting backcourt of Elliot and Seth. It's just not enough shooting. Elliot has already moved on, but I think so much of it, because it's like Drake is a good 3-point shooter, but not necessarily high volume. And I don't know that we can trust Caleb to do that coming in. And so you really need your 1, 2, and maybe even your 5 to be able to do that at a high level. As you said, it's got to come from everywhere. And so we're going to see what Carolina is able to do with all that. It's going to be a really interesting thing to watch it all come together, Pac Kilby. So, man, thank you so much for your thoughts and insights there. And I know we need to move on, but anything else on that roster side of it before we keep trucking?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. You did a good job of narrowing it down.
Love it. Okay, so what we want to get into, I just said it. We're looking at Carolina really needs somebody at the 1, the 2, and the 5. So let's, yesterday we looked at a 1 and a 5 in Donovan Dent from New Mexico and Magoon Guath from San Diego State. Today, Coach Pac Kilby and I have a couple more point guards for us to look at. One would be staying in conference if he came over, and one might be moving over from Sin City. So we'll talk about that and a lot more coming up here in just a second. Right after I tell you about Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Because between dining out and online shopping and entertainment, it's easy to lose track of it all. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over all your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and instead you build wealth. Instead of juggling through multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, to track your spending, and you can even work at planning long-term goals. Something that's important to me is that my wife and I always want to make sure we're on the same page when it comes to finances and being transparent and helping do that all together. And thankfully, with Monarch Money, managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared accounts, you can track personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without all that stress, man. That's really important. So go ahead, take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, Coach Pac Kilby, Isaac Schade, we're going to move in now to talking about some specific players that we would like to see Carolina target. This first target, to our knowledge, has not been, is not in contact with Carolina, but either him specifically or someone in this mold, I think would be a great replacement for Elliot Cadeau. And this player in question is Nait George. Spell the weirdest spelling of Nathan I've ever seen, Naithan. He's played 2 years at Georgia Tech, so we'll have 2 years of eligibility left. Last year for the Yellow Jackets scored 12.3 points a game, led the ACC with 6.5 assists per game, 3 turnovers a game, so like a little bit over 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. 34% three-point shooter on 5.2 attempts a game, so not massive percentage, but a nice volume there from him. Has just over a steal a game as well. Pac Kilby, as you watch Nate George, we've seen him play Carolina twice in his Georgia Tech career. Both split those. There was the one that they won in Atlanta last year where that foul was not called, where RJ was fouled at the end of the game. And then the game early ACC play this year where Carolina won that thing. And so Pac, as we look at it, he scored 12 and 16 points against Carolina in his career. What do you like about Nate George's game?
Well, here's the thing I like about Nate. I mean, when you look at the stats and you don't just watch the game, you just look at the stats, you see a lot of similarity in assists. I mean, it's the one guy in the ACC that had more assists than Elliot Cadeau at 6. I think he was right at 6.5 per game. And so I think I like that. And I think a lot of Carolina people like that, because a lot of the things I've been seeing is when they talk about losing Elliot Cadeau, they're like, man, he just passes the ball so well. Well, he would help fill that gap. But what I really like about Nate is he's a little bit better of a scorer. I think he's more consistent from 3, like we just talked about. What'd you say, 34% on a higher volume?
Yes, higher volume. So last year, Elliot attempted 2.3 threes per game and shot it at 33.7%. So just slightly lower percentage, but on like 3 fewer attempts a game. Elliot's totals were 29 of 86. For Nate George, let me get back up to his totals, was 60 of 177. So like more than doubled Elliot's makes.
Yeah. And I like that. I mean, he's got volume from the 3-point line. He shoots it consistently. But what I really like about Nate is his size. You know, he's 6'3". He's got pretty good length. And so I think that would be a major improvement for Carolina. If you were telling me we could get 6'3", 6.5 assists per game, fairly consistent scorer, but has size and length, I feel really good about that. Yeah. The only knock I think that I see is similar to Elliot Cadeau. He does turn the ball over. And you know, the one positive, I guess, is his turnover percentage was 19% versus 25% turnover percentage for Elliot Cadeau. So he doesn't turn the ball over quite as much, but he has turned it over some. So that'd be something to watch. But he does bring a lot of good things to the table. Yeah.
And it's, you know, compared, like yesterday, we talked about Donovan Dent, whose turnover percentage is much lower, or we're about to talk about a young man here in a little bit whose turnover percentage is 10%, right? And so there are some differences there. So Nate definitely would need to clean that up. I mean, yes, his turnover percentage is 6 percentage points fewer than Elliot, but still that's a little bit too much to me. Pac, you talked about Carolina needing more size and length and stuff like that. Do you think that 6'3", 185-ish? I don't know Nate George's wingspan, but is that 6'3", 185? Is that tall enough? And to go back to your other word that I said I liked, is that meaty enough for you?
He's definitely meatier. No, I think so. I think 6'3", 185 is about like the baseline for me, though. I'd like to get to those 6'3", 6'4 type point guards that have good length and can be really disruptive defensively. And that's not to say to discount guys like Joel Berry and Marcus Page that have come through. I know there are guys that are smaller that can absolutely play. But the game is just trending to size and length. And I think Carolina needs to match that. And Nate George is a good start with that. He does have appropriate size and length for today's game.
Pac, I remember in Carolina's games against Georgia Tech when he's played being really impressed with his poise, his kind of game control. And we've seen Georgia Tech pop, like it's been weirdly up and down in these first 2 years under Damon Stoudemire, right? Like they've clipped some big teams in both years, like oddly out of the blue. And Nate George is the head of that snake, when it comes to leading that. And so just somebody that seems to have that spark that you think could work in North Carolina,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the fact that I know the ACC hasn't been, what we're used to seeing, especially this year, but he's played in the ACC. He's played in big games. You're right. They've beat some good teams. Heck, they beat Carolina last year when we were pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And he's been, like you said, the head of the snake. He's been running point for them in those things. So I think that, like, having that experience is also a big key. And he's been there, done that, and he's performed really well in a lot of those games. And so I love that he has that. But also, what I really like? I like that and I know you could say the same thing about Cadeau. Cadeau's going to be a junior, but I like that about Nate George as well. 2 years of eligibility, but a lot of times that sophomore to junior year, you really can make a huge leap. It's kind of like you go from being a young man to a grown man in basketball. Like that junior year is a huge year, and so I like that. That is another positive towards Nate George, that he's got 2 years under his belt.
Yeah, I like that as well, Pac. That seems to make sense. I talked about with Elliot on yesterday's show. His career high in scoring was 19. I joked because Donovan Dent's scoring average last year was higher at 20 points than Elliot's career high in scoring, which is kind of crazy. As for so that's just made me think to look at that with each of these guys. Nate George has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 career 20-point games with a career high of 28 at Clemson. How about that? That's pretty encouraging for me in that thing. But had 7 assists in that game as well, but also 8 turnovers. So there's that. Like that is just something. Pac, I think one of the things you described to me before we started recording today is like there's a lot of similarity to Elliot, just a little bit less of the negative, a little bit more of the positive, and a little bit more of the size and beef. And so it's like, a slightly upgraded Elliot, right? Like, I don't know if that's an appropriate way to put it, but that feels about right to me.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. In a lot of ways, there's a lot of similarities, but it's like you said, he's better at the things that Elliot really brought to the table. He's slightly better, and his floor is higher than Elliot's. And I think that fits Carolina really well.
Pac, if we're going to do this in the next segment too. If I offered you Elliot Cadeau, Donovan Dent, and Nate George as your point guard, who would you take?
Well, I would take Donovan Dent.
Me too.
I think almost anybody in the country would take Donovan Dent, if we're being honest about it. If that is an option, we need to make that happen.
Yep.
At a reasonable price. We can't use all of our NIL money on one player, but if we can make it happen, he is a major difference maker.
Nate George or Elliot Cadeau, who would you take?
Nate George.
Okay. Good. Now, we're going to play this game again. We've got another point guard to look at, a little bit more diminutive in size, more in that Elliot size range. This is Dedon Thomas, whose dad is a legend in UNLV, and he might be headed elsewhere out of the desert unless a former Georgia Tech coach, ironically enough, could keep him home. We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about Nissan. Look, we're all about the stats here at Locked On because numbers don't lie. And when it comes to the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, the numbers are on an MVP level. With the ability to tow up to 8,500 pounds, it can quite literally carry the whole team, plus the gear, wherever you need to go. It's powered by a twin-turbo V6 engine delivering the strength and performance to handle highways, back roads, and everything in between. And with room for up to 8 people, the Armada Pro 4X is built for big crews, big adventures, and even bigger memories. Whether you're exploring off-road trails or you're rolling up to the arena, the Armada Pro 4X brings power, versatility, and style wherever you go. So go ahead, take your adventures to new heights in the all-new Nissan Armada Pro 4X. Learn more about it at nissanusa.com. We want to look now at a potential candidate to replace Elliot Cadeau. This is another one that, similar to Nate George that we just talked about, that we don't have record of Carolina connecting with, but we think is somebody worth looking at and investigating. And this is Dedon Thomas Jr. from UNLV. I specify the junior because his dad, Dedon Sr., played at UNLV from the 91-92 season through the 93-94 season. Now, you might be wondering, was that when UNLV was so hot? No, he came literally the year after their great run, and it just wasn't quite the same after that. They won the championship in 90, lost to Duke in the Final Four in 91, and then Dedon came the next year. But a great point guard in his own right, 8-9 assists a game, his junior and senior year. Crazy, crazy stuff there. But his son Dedon just finished his sophomore year at UNLV. Pac Kilby, what do you like about Mr. Dedon Thomas?
Well, here's what I really like about him. Wherever Houston would go to find their players, they would find Dedon there. Like, when you watch Houston, it's just like, golly, they're so tough and they're so scrappy, and they've just got that dog in them. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of how Dedon is, right? He's what he lacks in size, he makes up for with heart, effort, intensity, toughness. You could even compare it to the old Roy Williams saying, he's a tough little nut. That's kind of the way Dedon is. He's just real tough and scrappy, and he finds a way to get the job done. And I really like that about him. And that's not to take away from his ability as a player. He's a decent scorer. He's a good passer. He does not turn the ball over. He's just really solid, really level-headed, does a lot of great things. But I think the highlight of his game is just how tough he is, and he's about making winning plays. And I think that's a huge asset for a point guard. So there's a lot to like about him.
Yeah, I was just trying to look up his win share as you were talking there. His offensive rating is 112.3. His freshman year it was. His defensive rating is not as good as I would like, and that is certainly a concern with it. Pac, let me ask you this. You talked in segment 1 about Carolina needing size and length. That is a massive concern that the Carolina fan base has been concerned about with a 6'0" RJ Davis and a 6'1" Elliot Cadeau. Well, here we sit here talking about Dedon Thomas, who is 6'1", 170. Is that a deal breaker for you, or is it worth investigating?
I think it would be a deal breaker for me.
Okay.
And it's not to say, that he's not a great player, because he is. I just don't know that he fits what we need in such a make or break year, especially. We got to have the guy at the one. And I'm just not sure he fits that mold. I really like his game.
Yeah.
To say, hey, I'd come to Carolina and play a 6-man role or an off the bench role or a backup point guard role, then, oh yeah, I'd welcome him. But for the role that we need him to play, I think it's probably a deal breaker, just because we do need that size and that meat, like we talked about.
So is it worth even continuing to have a conversation about him then? Or, as we do it now, maybe we should think like, hey, we're looking at this guy as a potential backup point guard, but would he be willing to come and take on that role? I don't know that he would.
I don't know if he would, but you know what? Money talks sometimes. If the price is right, and I guess it depends on what his other offers were and what roles were being offered to him, then maybe that would be a possibility. But yeah, you're probably right. I don't know. He's probably looking for something a little bit bigger than what he's got right now, and so I don't know if Carolina fits that mold or not. But I think, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's a deal breaker? Would you take him?
I would look at him. I would definitely talk about it, but we'd have to think long and hard, because the size it's just been an issue.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that much, like 6'3", like 2 more inches, but it's like this guy had 15.6 points a game, 4.7 assists, under 2 turnovers a game. The steal numbers aren't wild, 0.7 steals a game, not doing much, rebounding 2 rebounds a game. Is a fine 3-point shooter, 35.3%, but not high volume, just 2.6 attempts per game. His total last year was 24 of 68. So, Pac, I think it's maybe a thing for me of like, I could get past the size if you had otherworldly 3-point shooting or something like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For you. I think, a lot of what I've been reading and what I've been hearing and different things is that a lot of Carolina's transfer portal targets or ideal targets aren't in the portal yet.
Yep.
But the more I think about that, we kind of heard that a lot last year.
I am right with you, dude. I am gun shy because of that.
Yes. So I'm kind of thinking, with Dedon, it's like we need to keep an iron in the fire. Because if we miss on Nate George and Donovan Dent goes with Patino to Xavier or whatever ends up happening, we might need to have somebody like him. And I don't want anyone to misinterpret what we're saying. He is a good player. And if
absolutely
do good things for us, in an ideal world, we get more size.
Yeah.
But he is a good player.
I'm so glad you said that. I have, seen and heard a lot of that too of, yeah, but a lot of the guy, like the top big that Carolina has their eyes on is still in the portal still playing. And it's like, heard that all last offseason. And look, we wound up with Jalen Washington as our starting 5. And like it's not like we couldn't see it. You and I said it all summer long, Pac, like Jalen Washington is not a starting 5 at North Carolina.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, and last year it was all Kalkbrenner's coming. He's coming from Creighton, and there was all that hype, and then he never even touched the portal.
No.
I'm with you there. I'm a little bit burnt from that. So my thought is we're not really too good for him. Like, we need to keep an iron in the fire because we don't know when that might become like an important player for us.
Yeah.
Comes to that.
Man, and I would love him as a backup point guard. Like, it feels like Carolina needs like a Nate Britt, but that's so hard to do in this day and age, to have a trustworthy backup point guard that can run your team without much drop off. And that's a struggle. All right, Pac Kilby, man, great conversation today, talking about the shape of Carolina's roster, talking about Nate George, Dedon Thomas. Again, let me emphasize, neither of these guys have we heard any specific connectivity to North Carolina with. It's just guys we think we should at least be taking a look at to vet and to evaluate their potential fit for the 25-26 Tar Heels. Both of these guys, again, rising juniors, so would have 2 years of eligibility. Pac, I'm with you, and I forgot to ask. I'm assuming based on our conversation, you feel the same about Dedon as the Nate George conversation. Donovan Dent over all of them.
Yes, absolutely.
And would you take Nate George over Dedon Thomas?
I would. Yeah, I would take Nate.
Would you take Dedon Thomas over Elliot Cadeau?
That is a tough question. They both they differ in ways. I think I would take on. I'm huge on even in my own coaching with my own teams. I think what wins games is not turning the ball over and being great defensively and rebounding well. And Dedon does not turn the ball over. So no. I think I would go with that. I think I would choose that over Cadeau.
Yeah, we often talk about gaining extra possessions through steals or offensive rebounds. Not turning the ball over is saving possession, which is equally, it's the same thing you've often talked about, Pac, of like, hey, I could score 12 points and maybe I'm an 8-point a game scorer and I'm 4 points above my average. You could also help your team if you're the opposition by holding me to 4 points, which would be 4 points. It's a similar thing. Like, keeping the ball is just as good as gaining extra possessions, right? And so that's good stuff. Folks, thanks so much for being here with us today. Lots more coming up tomorrow on the show. Also, the ladies back in action in the Sweet 16 against Duke. Crazy stuff there. We got to get ready for that. If you've not subscribed to the show on YouTube, make sure you do so you don't miss a second of Locked On Tar Heels. If you've not joined the Discord, we'd love to have you there. That link is in the show notes. We're talking Carolina all day, every day, pretty much. And if you want to go even deeper, you can join the Locked On Tar Heels Insider Program, where I'm sharing every transfer portal rumor I hear, any sourced material I hear. That's all going straight to the Locked On Tar Heels Insider. You can get in on that. You guys, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow, but until then, Pac Kilby, tell them the truth.
Peace.